Ever feel, you're constantly playing catch up with life? Like there are just not enough hours of the day to, well, do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're diving into something that really gets at that feeling,
Mm.
the ADHD tax.
Oh,
We're
interesting.
looking at this website, Cheapaba. It's all about,
Mm-hmm.
navigating neurodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about this idea of the ADHD tax, not the kind you file on April 15th, but
Right, right.
it can feel like life throws these extra costs your way
Yeah,
when your brain works a little differently.
I like that analogy.
So what is this tax exactly?
Well, it is a brilliant metaphor, isn't it? It really captures that feeling of constantly paying extra, whether it's your time, energy, money, even your own well-being,
Yeah.
just to navigate a world that wasn't really designed with, different ways of thinking in mind.
And it's not just ADHD, right? This tax idea, it can apply to folks across the neurodiversity spectrum.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that what might be like a small inconvenience for one person
Right.
could be a major hurdle for someone else. And those hurdles, they add up over time.
And Cheap ABA really digs into these hidden costs,
Mhm.
and it can be a lot. Like, they highlight how it's not just about your bank account, but it's your mental well-being, relationships, your career.
It really does impact your quality of life and on multiple levels and, often in ways that most people don't even pick up on.
Right. They just don't see it.
And it's important to remember, we're not trying to place blame here or anything. It's really about
Right, yeah.
shedding light on these often invisible challenges so that we can understand them better?
And hopefully figure out how to, navigate them.
Right? Exactly.
So should we unpack some of these specific costs they talk about?
Yeah, let's dive in a little deeper.
One thing they really zoom in on is the financial strain. Like just managing ADHD, a lot of people think, oh, insurance covers that, but
Right. If only it were that simple.
it's way more complicated.
Yeah, you've got medication costs, therapy copays, specialized coaching. It all adds up so fast. And that's with insurance.
And that's if you have insurance that covers it. The article mentions that sometimes insurance might not cover the best type of therapy or the most effective medications.
Oh, absolutely.
And that leaves people with these impossible choices.
Right. Like, do you prioritize your health or your finances? It's a lose-lose. And that's where that tax feeling really hits home. It's like you're being penalized for something that's, totally out of your control.
You're right. It's like this extra layer of difficulty on something that's already difficult. And then on top of that, there's the educational piece. The article talks about how parents of neurodivergent kids, they're often hit with all these extra expenses just to give their kids the support they need.
Absolutely. IEPs are a big one. Individualized education programs. It's basically like a tailor-made learning plan for a student, making sure they've got the tools and the support to really thrive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
A one-size-fits-all approach to education isn't going to work for everyone. But I imagine creating that kind of personalized plan has its own challenges.
It does. The article talks about the costs of things like specialized tutoring, programs designed for neurodiverse learners,
Right.
and even legal fees if parents have to, really advocate for their child's needs within the school system.
Wow. So you're not just dealing with the emotional part,
Hmm.
but potentially all these costs too. That's a lot.
It is, and for families already on a tight budget, these added costs can be incredibly stressful. You're constantly fighting this financial battle just to make sure your child has the same chances as everyone else.
Right. It's that feeling of constantly paying extra just to keep up.
Hmm.
And it sounds like those financial burdens don't go away once you're an adult, even at work. The article from Cheap ABA talks about how work itself can be really tough for neurodivergent individuals.
It's true, and it's about so much more than just earning a paycheck, right? It's about finding a purpose, feeling confident, contributing.
Exactly.
And if you're struggling to meet expectations that weren't designed with your brain in mind, that can really impact how you see yourself, your whole career path.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
It says here that individuals with ADHD often face difficulties with organization, time management focus,
Right.
which can lead to, misunderstandings with their boss, missed deadlines, even trouble moving up in their job.
It's tough for sure. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you break out of that cycle?
It's such a clear example of how this tax plays out,
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just keeping your job. Like,
Yeah.
imagine going to work every day and feeling like you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, I get that.
That's what it can feel like for neurodivergent people trying to navigate a workplace that just wasn't made for them.
And that's got to be exhausting, just mentally and emotionally draining.
Absolutely.
Is that where those workplace accommodations come in?
Exactly. Things like flexible hours or having the right tools or even just, being able to talk to your boss about your needs.
Right. Those can make a huge difference. But the article says that actually getting those accommodations often means having to really advocate for yourself, which
Yeah.
that's not always easy, especially in a new job or if your workplace isn't super understanding.
Just like you need to already be like in the system to get the support to stay in the system, which sounds tough.
It can be a real catch-22.
Yeah.
And speaking of systems, Cheapaba also talks about how this tax impacts, just everyday life, just doing normal stuff.
I'm guessing it's more than just like groceries being expensive, right?
Oh, yeah, way more. For a lot of people, making dinner or tidying up their place, those are just normal things, right?
Right.
But for someone with ADHD, those simple things can feel impossible.
Because we rely so much on executive function for that stuff, and that can look different for people with neurodiversity. Exactly. And that's where you see those hidden costs again. Like the article mentions people using those meal prep services because planning and cooking is just too much.
Right.
Or they hire organizers to help with clutter because, their brain just doesn't work that way.
Which again adds up so fast. You're not just paying for the service, but for a workaround to a system that wasn't made for you.
It's true. It's the price of adaptation. You're constantly trying to bridge this gap between how your brain works and what the world expects.
And it's exhausting. You're always catching up, always adapting. I bet that takes a toll mentally and emotionally, which kind of leads us to what might be the biggest cost of all, the impact on mental health.
Huge impact. It's easy to get stuck on the financial stuff, But the emotional part can be even bigger. Think about carrying this weight around all the time that you're always behind, always messing up.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to anxiety, stress, maybe even depression.
Especially when you're surrounded by people who don't have those struggles.
Yeah.
And they make it look easy. It's got to feel isolating.
It is. It really is. And that's another thing the article talks about, that people with ADHD might have a hard time with social cues, with building relationships. They feel like they don't fit in. All of that adds to the emotional burden.
I've got to say, this whole conversation has been really eye-opening. But I also don't want to bum everyone out.
Right.
This isn't about dwelling on the tough stuff. We're trying to figure out solutions. Right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Recognizing the ADHD tax isn't about complaining. It's about saying, okay, this is real, so how do we deal with it?
Exactly. So where do we go from here? How do we navigate this tax in a way that, actually helps people, that creates a better, more understanding world?
The million-dollar questions. And luckily, Cheapaba does have some good ideas. One of the biggest is just seeking support.
Support, yeah.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like? It's easy to say, but actually finding the right support, that's tough.
It really can be. And that's why I think resources like Cheapaba can be so helpful, They talk a lot about connecting with, community organizations, support groups.
Right.
Even those online forums can be huge. Just finding people who get it, who understand what it's like to live with ADHD every day. That's really powerful.
It's like finding your people, right? No more having to explain yourself all the time.
Exactly. Sharing tips, figuring out what works for other people.
Yeah.
And just realizing you're not alone in this. And it's not always, just about having someone to talk to. It can be practical, too. The article talks about looking for those financial assistance programs.
Oh, right.
Grants, scholarships, things that can actually help with some of those costs.
I didn't even think about that, but that makes sense. You have to know what you're entitled to, what's out there.
It's true. They specifically mention advocating for those IEPs for students or asking for those accommodations at work.
Right. Yeah.
Because those systems are there to help, but you've got to know how to use them.
Which I imagine can be intimidating, especially if you're already feeling overwhelmed.
It's a lot, for sure. But even little things, like just talking to your family about it, that can be a big first step.
Yeah. Just feeling understood. And that kind of reminds me, the article talks about technology too, which can be a mixed bag, right?
Totally. It's easy to get caught up in buying every new app, thinking it'll magically fix everything.
Yeah, been there.
Right. But there are some really useful tools out there, a lot of them free or really cheap, that can make things easier.
It's about finding what works for you, not just following the latest trends, right?
Exactly. Maybe it's a simple to-do list app or one of those noise-canceling apps so you can focus.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
It's about figuring out how to work with your brain, not against it.
And sometimes the simplest things help the most. For me, just having routines makes a huge difference. Even little things like prepping coffee the night before or laying out my clothes, it just frees up brain space for other stuff.
That makes so much sense. Those little routines, those micro routines can really make your day smoother. You're not using up all your energy on decisions. You can save it for what matters.
Exactly. This has been such an interesting conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot. What about you? big takeaways.
Definitely. I think this whole ADHD tax idea, as tough as it is, it's really about starting a conversation, right?
Right.
Making people aware of the struggles that a lot of people are dealing with every day.
It's about making the invisible visible.
Exactly. And hopefully, pushing for a world that doesn't just tolerate those differences, but actually embraces them.
Well said.
Hmm.
As we wrap up today, I want to leave everyone with this. The ADHD tax, yeah, it might be something individuals feel, but the impact of it goes way beyond that. It affects families, workplaces, communities, even the economy.
It really highlights how important it is to build a more inclusive and supportive world for everyone.
So keep the conversation going. Talk to your friends, share this with anyone who might need to hear it, see what resources are out there in your community. Let's all keep advocating for a world that values and supports all kinds of minds.